be back with you, back to warmer weather, back to see my friends and, of course, my family, my church family. I want to echo what Clay said a moment ago. We had a great fall festival last night. I know that Bradley and Wanda get a lot of credit for that. They do a great job in organizing that. It does take an army to put it on, though, and we thank you so much for your help, your volunteering, and all the hard work you did to prepare and then to put it on last night. I think we did exceptionally well as far as reaching out to our community around us and hopefully making some inroads in bringing people to Christ, bringing people to church. That's a great thing, a great effort, and thank you so much for those who helped with it. You know, like a lot of people, Kylie Basutti had a goal, and she pursued that goal relentlessly. What was her goal, you ask? To be a Victoria's Secret model. That was the only thing she wanted in life, her only dream and aspiration. And when she won a competition in order to be the next Victoria's Secret model, she was ecstatic. But she was recently married, and her husband claimed a relationship to Jesus Christ, and she began to wonder if maybe she was sending the wrong message, if maybe she was conflicting with her faith by posing almost nude in catalogs for Victoria's Secret. She started thinking about how young women may be looking up to her as a role model. She started thinking about how she could be setting the wrong example for them. She thought about how there are voyeurs on the internet looking through the catalogs and other publications that she would be printed in and her picture would be viewed in. And she got to thinking about how that would not be appropriate for a Christian. In the end, she said that was her only goal, but it kept nagging her because she believed it to conflict with her Christian beliefs. She was quoted as saying this, "I finally achieved my dream, the dream that I always wanted, but when I finally got it, it wasn't all that I thought it would be." Have you ever been there? I think we as Christians, we as people, often pursue some goal relentlessly, only to find out that when we reach that goal, it really wasn't as important or maybe all that we thought it would be. Sometimes we come face to face with the reality that the goal that we have pursued when we reach the end is really the wrong goal. And don't feel bad, many people have done this. There are many people today living with the consequences of a wrong goal or a wrong choice, pursuing something so relentlessly only to find out in the end that it wasn't worthwhile. Have you ever been faced with that moment when you had to decide between a worldly goal and a godly one? I'm sure most of us have. Have you ever been forced to make a decision between the temporary and the eternal? You know, folks, I don't think I've ever preached a series of lessons more convicting than this one that we start this morning. I have come to the realization that I am an idolater. That's a hard realization to come to. Because you see, like many of you, I always thought of idolatry as bowing down to a graven image, dancing around a statue or something of that nature. But you see, in our culture, we worship many idols. The idol of sports, the idol of money or wealth, the idol of family even. We see it in our world around us. One of our favorite athletes makes a great play and people in the stands start bowing in a gesture to them. We see it in how we pursue our career and just set aside everything in order to get ahead in life and achieve power and success and financial gain. We see it in our family, in our household, where everything is put on the back burner, including a relationship with God, so that we can have our life revolve around our kids. Do you believe that you are serving an idol in your life? Anything that takes the place of God in your heart, anything that squeezes out God in your heart, in your life, becomes an idol to you. You become an idolater when you allow anything to take the place of God, even for a moment. That's scary to think that how many of us fall into that category. Proverbs 27:19 states, "As in water face reflects face, so the heart of man reflects man." The heart of the matter is a matter of the heart. The heart tells the story. What is your heart set on? What is it that you pursue relentlessly? Because whatever sits on the throne of your heart is going to reveal what your God is. The purpose of this series is to identify some of the more common gods that probably many of us serve or have served at one time in our lives. Things like money, entertainment, sex, things that vie for the place in our hearts, the things that compete with God in our lives. We work hard at molding and creating our golden images, our golden calves. Whether it be a promotion at work, whether it be a body that is strong and fit, whether it be a team that wins, or food that soothes. What are you pursuing? What are you creating in your life to bring you happiness? What is your golden calf? Identify it, and then destroy it. You may be thinking to yourself, but Chris, anything and everything can really fall into that category, and that is right. You're absolutely correct. It's not wrong to have things. It's not wrong to be wealthy. It's not wrong to love sports or like sports. It's not wrong to love your children. Those things in and of themselves are not bad. But when your devotion to them becomes so great that they push God out of the equation, then that is obviously wrong. That is idolatry. Why do you think God so often referred to the Israelites' unfaithfulness as spiritual adultery? God understood what we need to understand. That when you turn your back to Him and chase after other things, you're treading down a path of destruction. In his book, God's at War, Kyle Idleman makes this statement. He said, God is always first place, but there are no places. God isn't interested in competing against others or being first among many. God will not be part of any hierarchy. He wasn't saying before me as in ahead of me. A better understanding of the Hebrew word translated before me is in my presence. God declines to sit atop an organizational flow chart. He is the organization. He is not interested in being president of the board. He is the board. And life doesn't work until everyone else sitting around the table in the boardroom of your heart is fired. He is the God, the only God, and there are no other applicants for that position. A choice has to be made. Who will sit on the throne of your heart? Turn with me in your Bibles to Joshua, chapter 24. You can probably guess where I'm going here. Joshua chapter 24, beginning in verse 14. There it reads, Now therefore fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. If it is agreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now understand, Moses and his generation died before entering the promised land. And now Joshua has been commissioned to lead the people home, so to speak. And by the time we reach chapter 24, Joshua is an old man. He has fought many battles. He has been successful in putting his faith and trust in the Lord. And now he is gathering the leaders together. He has fought off many hostile tribes, fought in many battles, bears the scars and wisdom of a life lived for God. And now he addresses the people in what would seem to be his farewell address. The people listen as Joshua gets right to the point, and he throws down a challenge. Of all the battles he has led up to this point, this one is probably the most challenging. In essence, he tells them that they have a choice to make. You can choose to follow the Lord God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or you can choose a different God. It's up to you. Don't you find it interesting that Joshua gives three options here? He gives three options. You can choose to follow God, or you can choose these other two. You know, I've never ended as a preacher an invitation with multiple choice. But Joshua understands something. He understands that this cannot be forced. You cannot force somebody to worship God. A choice has to be made. And so he's presenting them with that choice. They can follow the gods of Egypt, where they used to live. They can follow the gods that their fathers served beyond the river, or they can follow the gods that the people that they recently defeated? In other words, door 1, 2, or 3, which one are you going to choose? You know, life is full of options. Not long ago, I was watching television, and there was this gentleman that came on there trying to get me to call in and set up a reverse mortgage. I don't even know what a reverse mortgage is, but there were actual customers telling me how badly I needed a reverse mortgage and how I would be almost ignorant not to set up a reverse mortgage. And the program, the infomercial ended with the words, "Don't wait, call now." And that's our culture, isn't it? Don't wait, call now, dial this number, visit us online, order now, don't delay, operators are standing by. Every product that is out there is marketed toward the worshiper in us. Every product claims to be your Savior, doesn't it? If you're unhappy, if you're bored, if you're depressed, then buy this product. Talk to your doctor, eat at this restaurant, drive this car, wear these jeans, visit this destination. It's all about catering to the worshiper in you, because life is about pursuing happiness at all costs, relentlessly. There is no none of the above box. You have to choose. You have to make a choice. Don't be fooled into thinking that worship only applies to religion, because it doesn't. Everyone worships something. Even people who aren't interested in religion will worship something. And our culture caters to that. They seek to cater to the worshiper within us all, to fill our hearts with something that is not godly. Many times we see people worshiping things that are not godly, and it's sad, isn't it? We all worship something, and Joshua says, "Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." We all have a choice to make, and I can't make that choice for you. I believe that we all worship something, and I believe there is a warning within Joshua's command here. We had better carefully examine our lives and make certain that no other person or thing sits on the throne of our hearts. Many times it just happens. We can focus so intently on a goal or so intently on something in our lives that it just overtakes us. We don't mean for it to happen, but it happens. That is why we must choose carefully. We must make an honest assessment. We must be fully aware of what it is that could lead us astray, because whatever you choose is going to lead you somewhere. Whatever you choose to worship is going to shape you and mold you. The choice you make will ultimately determine where you end up. Several months ago, I had to go up to Abilene Regional and have an ultrasound done because Dr. Longley thought my gallbladder was acting up. And it was kind of neat to watch on the screen, as they looked at your pancreas, your liver, and all those different organs. It was an inside look. If you've ever had an MRI done, a lot of times they shoot this dye into your veins to highlight a lot of the things that are going on inside your body so they can get a good, clear look of your insides. I want us to do that this morning. I want us to have a spiritual ultrasound, a spiritual sonogram, a spiritual MRI, so that we can determine what it is that is vying for control in our lives. Maybe you already know, but I think it's important to highlight it so that we can crush it, or at least get it in its proper perspective. And so let me ask you a series of questions, and ask these questions to yourself as we go along. I think it's in your outline in the bulletin, but here they are. Number one, what disappoints you? What disappoints you? If you were to identify your greatest disappointments, what would they be? Sometimes our greatest disappointments are tied to things that are not eternal at all, but rather earthly. Are your disappointments disproportionate? Are you disappointed over things that should not garner that much disappointment? We often determine if something has become way too important to us if we feel overwhelmed with disappointment. I understand disappointment is common among us. Being disappointed with our children for bad behavior, for example, is certainly something that we can all relate to, perhaps. That's not what we're talking about here. Rather, we're talking about being overly disappointed by things that are merely temporal or material. That can say something about who or what has your heart. Another question, what do you complain about the most? Do you constantly complain about your financial situation? If so, then that may be a god for you. Do you constantly complain about how you have nothing to wear? That could be an idol to you. Perhaps clothing has become a god for you. Do you constantly complain about the circumstances surrounding your life? Well, then maybe you have become a god for you. Maybe self is your god, one that we're going to talk about later on in this series. If you're not sure, ask someone. They'll tell you what you complain about the most. Where does your money go? Oftentimes you can look at your checkbook and see what your God is or what your gods are. What is it that you pay the most amount of money to? What is it that garners the most of your finances? The Bible tells us that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where your money goes can often tell you what God is winning your heart. What worries you? Are you afraid of death? Are you overly worried about your children? Are you phobic about some things? Do you fear losing your job, your house, your car, etc.? Worrying, anxiety can be perfectly healthy at times. We understand that there are certain things that garner worry and anxiety in our lives, and certainly that's legitimate at times. But when we are overly anxious, when we are overly worried to the point that we can't sleep at night, then whatever is causing that state can easily become an idol. Where do you go to get away? When you've had a really bad day at work, where do you go to get away? Do you go to the local bar? Do you go to the computer and look at pornography? Do you soothe yourself with food? Do you call up a friend and vent in anger? Psalm 46 and 12, or Psalm 46, 1 and 2 reads, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear. You know, if you've ever sat at the bedside of someone who was drawing their last breaths, if you ever held their hand as they were dying, you know that the one thing they needed more than anything at that point was just comfort. They wanted to know that their loved ones were there. If they were cognizant, if they were coherent and aware, they just want some comfort and some peace by having their family around. And many times, it's their faith in God that allows them to rest in that moment. I have stood at the bedside, knelt at the bedside of many individuals who were in that state. And I've seen many that have been able to pass peacefully from this life to the next because of their faith in God, because of their relationship with God. I hope that I get to that point, but I can tell you this, I don't believe they got to that point just on their deathbed. I believe it's a lifestyle. I believe it's a life they led up to that point. I believe it's them allowing God to be their strength and refuge daily that allowed them to get to that point. You hear me say all the time, this life is about preparation. We need to be preparing for that day. And one way that we prepare is by allowing God to be in control, allowing Him to be our strength and our refuge, a very present help in the time of trouble. What is it that bothers you, that scares you? What is it that you complain about? What are the things that have control of your life? And where do you go to get away? Hopefully you go to God. What angers you? Everyone has a trigger. Some people's trigger is quicker than others. Some people's fuse is shorter than others. Identify your triggers. What sets you off? How do you react sitting in traffic? Are you so competitive that when you lose it? What about your life is controlled by anger? How do you respond when someone cuts you off, follows you too closely, or steals your parking spot? How do you react in those situations? Why is it that some stranger can have so great a control over your emotions? Ask yourself that question. How can someone absolutely ruin your day? The answers to those questions could help us in identifying the gods in our lives. Perhaps anger is a god for you. And finally, what are your goals and aspirations? Nothing wrong with having goals and aspirations. In fact, I believe you should. I believe we should set goals. I believe we should have aspirations, but they should be kept in context, and they should never overshadow our relationship with God. When we are pursuing those things more heavily than a relationship with God, then we have set ourselves up for failure. We talk to our kids about setting goals and having aspirations or dreams, so to speak. But we quickly preface that by saying that kingdom things come first. Whatever job you choose, whatever career you choose, make certain that you can serve God in that capacity. Make certain that you make it about serving God. Everything that we do should be centered around being godly and serving Him first and foremost. I don't watch the show American Idol anymore, but I used to. And there was a time when it was in the tryout portion, the audition portion, and this lady gets up in front of the judges to audition, and she's terrible. I don't know who told her that she needs to go on the show and try out, but she was horrible. And if you've seen the show, you know that there are a lot of people like that. And after she got finished, they stuck the camera in her face, and she's crying hysterically, and she's saying, basically, this is all I ever wanted to do. I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't know how I'm going to go on. All I ever wanted to do was be a singer. And I'm thinking, really? Somebody told you could do this? But if you put all your eggs in that basket, you're going to be very disappointed, aren't you? It bothers me. It's a pet peeve when people say, you can do anything you want to do. No, you can't. Find the thing that you're good at. Serve God. Devote your life to Him. There are things that I can't do, and I need to understand that. I need to find what I'm good at, because there is no such thing as a zero-talent person. We all have talents and abilities. Use them for God. Make certain that our life is catering to Him and not these other things that are temporary, that are not eternal. Focus on Him. Be your best for Him. Invest everything in God. Pursue Him relentlessly, and I don't think you'll ever be disappointed. I want you to look with me at Exodus chapter 20, starting in verse 4. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. What do you think of when you think of jealousy? You think of something that's kind of junior high-ish, don't you? You think of, someone who's jealous because they're looking at your boyfriend or girlfriend, and you don't like them looking at your boyfriend or girlfriend, so you get jealous, right? Or they're talking to your spouse, and you don't like that, so you become jealous. You see them flirting with your boyfriend, girlfriend, or spouse, and you become jealous. It's the teammate who won't pass the ball because he wants all the glory for himself. He's jealous if somebody else gets the accolades or the glory. And so when we think of God as jealous, we really believe we're lowering Him down to our level, and we don't like that. But understand, in the Hebrew, jealous, as it refers to God, is really not talking about the negative sense and that we often think of it. God is not being junior high-ish when it says that He is jealous for us. In fact, the Hebrew translation of that word is very closely related to zealous. And what does it mean to be zealous? Zealous means that we have an intense enthusiasm, a burning desire or passion for something. My friends, God is zealous for you. He wants you. He wants a relationship with you. He is jealous for your heart, not because He is petty or insecure, but because He loves you and desires a relationship with you. I'd be more than concerned if a woman was flirting with me in front of my wife and she wasn't angered by that. If that didn't bother her, that would bother me. Because if she loves me and respects the covenant of marriage that we have, she should be a little jealous. As should I be if the shoe was on the other foot. If you were to walk into a restaurant and saw me having supper, a romantic dinner with another woman, that might anger you. And you may come to me and say, Chris, what are you doing? I'd say, relax. I'm just on a date. And you would say, now wait a minute. You're not supposed to be on a date, you're married. And I'd say, whoa, hang on, I love my wife, I just love her too. That would not fly with you. And you know why it wouldn't fly with you? Because you understand the covenant of marriage. I understand the covenant of marriage. I understand that this is an exclusive relationship. There are to be no other wives or spouses. And the same is true in a relationship with God. God doesn't ask to be put at the top of the list. He doesn't ask to be included with all the other things that you pursue in life. He's the only one on the list. He is the only one we serve. He is the only one we look to, the only one we invest everything in. He is it. We need to see God in the same light, perhaps as we do our spouse, or at least understand that covenant relationship. The only woman I am to be passionate about, the only woman I am to be zealous for is my wife, and above her, I need to be passionate and zealous about God in a relationship with Him. That means I have to make a choice. I cannot serve both God and wealth. I cannot serve both God and my career. I cannot serve both God and entertainment. I cannot serve both God and sports. I cannot serve both God and myself. It all comes down to a decision. God demands exclusive rights to my heart. He does not request to be placed at the top of the list. He is the only one on the list. We don't serve Him above all other gods in our lives. We serve Him only, and we smash the other gods in our lives. The one true God is the only one who can fulfill our deepest longing and satisfy our most profound need. You know, for centuries, people have been claiming to be God or Jesus. They still do today. There was a woman named Jemima Wilkinson who lived in the 1700s who believed at 20 years old that she had died and been raised from the dead. She gained 200 fierce followers. And one day she was standing on the banks of a lake and she said to her followers, "Do you believe that I can walk on this water?" And they said, "Yes, we believe." And she says, "Okay, then I don't need to do it." And she walked home on dry land. There have always been people claiming to be God, and it's ridiculous, the claims that they make. It's absolutely absurd. But you know, we think that's silly, and yet we're just as silly in the things that we pursue, the things that we deem as most important in our lives. We think it's silly that somebody would handle snakes or worship a graven image, and yet it can be just as absurd in the things that we do, in the things that we pursue. What is vying for your attention? What is battling for your heart? It reminds me of what the prophet Jeremiah stated. Chapter 2, starting in verse 26. As the thief is shamed when he is discovered, so the house of Israel is shamed. They, their kings, their princes, and their priests, and their prophets, who say to a tree, "You are my father," and to a stone, "You gave me birth." For they have turned their backs to me, and not their face, but in the time of their trouble they will say, "Arise and save us." But where are your gods which you made for yourself? Let them arise if they can save you in the time of your trouble, for according to the number of your cities are your gods, O Judah. I find Jeremiah's words here comical, don't you? I mean, the things he says here, "You are my father, and to a stone you gave me birth." But it's just as silly in the things that we pursue, the things that we strive for, the things that we worship. What are you chasing? What consumes you? Who has your heart? You know, when asked what the foremost commandment was, Jesus said these words. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, and with all of your strength." That sounds like everything, doesn't it? You've heard me say so many times, you get God right, you get everything right, and I believe that. Invest everything in Him, in a relationship with Him, and see how much better your life will be. He is jealous for your whole heart. Are you zealous for Him? Now, as I said in the opening, this has been very heart-wrenching for me as a series. As I prepared for it, I was hit with the reality that perhaps I need to dispel of some idols in my life. I find that I am constantly fighting not to give my heart to other things. And maybe you're in that same boat. You've tried rationalizing it. You've tried fooling yourself into thinking that it's okay, but ultimately you have to face the music, don't you? God is the only God who should rule my heart. You see, I don't think most of us sitting here this morning have a problem with faith or have a problem with following God. I think we all know that that is the most important thing or should be the most important thing in our lives. I don't think we necessarily consciously set out to worship an idol. We just find it so easy to do. You see, I don't think the problem is that we don't choose Christ. I don't think that's the problem. Here's what I think the problem is. I think the problem is we've tried to follow without leaving everything behind. I think the problem is we've tried to follow Christ while dragging those other things behind us. Rather than letting it go and carrying our cross and following Him completely and solely, we've tried to follow Him while following some other things. Crosses are heavy. They're burdensome. And you can't carry a cross while carrying all your other stuff. At some point, you've got to make a full-on commitment. Joshua knew that there was still a bit of Egypt clinging to the sandals of the Israelites. He knew that there was still some of that history within them. He knew that they need to surrender completely because old gods die hard, don't they? But notice what Joshua says. Choose this day whom you will serve. This day. Every day is a choice. Every day you wake up, you've got to choose. Am I going to serve my job, my career, these other things in my life, or am I going to serve God completely and totally? Every day is a choice. Choose this day whom you will serve. Who are you serving today? Make the right choice. And if you haven't made a choice to serve God, in that you haven't stepped out in faith, repented of your sins, confessed Jesus as Lord, and been immersed in the waters of baptism for the remission of sins, that's the most important choice you will ever make. Choose that this day. Or maybe you are a Christian, and perhaps you've chosen other things to come before God. Maybe there are other things sitting on the throne of your heart that need to be dispelled of and gotten rid of. Choose this day. Come now as we stand and as we sing.